Okay, so today we're going to start talking about more about the music industry. So the top three music groups. So the top selling music group is Universal Music Group. So again, the top selling music group is Universal Music Group. And they sold about $2.8 billion, which is about 31% of the market. The second top selling music group, or in second place, I should say, is Warner Music Group, was number two. They made about $1.5 billion, about 17% of the market. And Sony was the third um, largest music group. They sold about or made about $1.3 billion in revenue, or about 15% of the market. So again, Universal is the largest, Warner's second largest, and Sony is the third largest. Those are the top three um, music groups within the music industry. And again, Universal is number one. The largest independent is the Concord Music Group. So the market structure, you have a handful of powerful distributors that control most of the market, at least here in the United States. That would be an oligopoly, is the market structure for the United States. Again, it's an oligopoly. You have a handful of powerful music labels or powerful music groups. In this case, we have three, and these three control about 60, over 60% of the market. These three companies control, so that's a pretty strong oligopoly. The number one revenue stream is paid subscription streaming. So again, the number one um, revenue stream for these three music groups, or just for the music industry, I should say, is paid subscription streaming. So paid subscription streaming is the number one revenue stream. The second revenue stream would be physical sales like vinyl and CD and those sorts of things. And the third revenue stream would be digital downloads. The world's top selling single was The Weekend, Blinding Lights. So that's the top digital single in terms of global sales, and the global sales was at 2.8 billion. The top selling album, at least globally, is or was, I should say, BTS Map of the Soul was the top global album. They sold 4.8 million. And the most streamed song, if you're curious, in the 20th century, that would be Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody was the top streamed song of the 20th century. And if you're wondering what was the top selling album, at least here in the United States, it was Folklore by Taylor Swift. So again, the world's top selling single was The Weekend, Blinding Lights. The top selling album was BTS's Map of the Soul. So in terms of global revenue has increased. It's at $21.6 billion. So again, $21.6 billion. What part of the world is growing the fastest in terms of revenue? That would be Latin America. Latin America is growing the fastest. It's about at 16%. So again, Latin America is the fastest, is growing the fastest in terms of revenue. And yes, revenue has increased, and it's up to $21.6 billion globally. And again, what part of the world is growing the fastest? That would be Latin America, about 16%. They grew from 2019 to 2020. The four primary revenue streams. So what is the top revenue stream globally? It would be streaming. and this includes also ad-supported streaming as well. And that was at $13.4 billion, or 62% of the industry. So it's a significant part of the industry again. So that would be streaming at $13.4 billion, or at 62% of the industry. And just if you're kind of curious, it's grown almost 20% from last year. So almost 20% from last year. Physical revenue is actually gone down. So when I talk about physical, I'm referring to vinyl and CD. It's about $4.2 billion. It's about 19.5% of the industry. And it went down 4.7%. Performance rights is at 2.3 billion, or at 10% of the industry, 10.6% of the industry, I should say. And that increased by 10.1% from last year. And downloading would be the fourth revenue stream. That's not listed here, but I did say four primary revenue streams. The fourth would be downloading at $1.2 billion, and that's about 5.8% of the industry, and that went down 15.7%. So obviously you see a big shift in the industry as more and more people are streaming music as opposed to buying physical music, and as opposed to downloading. So again, the top revenue stream would be streaming, number one, which is about 62% of the industry's revenue comes from streaming. Physical, meaning vinyl, CD, would be number two. It's about 19.5% of the industry in terms of overall revenue. Performance rights is at $2.3 billion, or 10.6% of the industry, went up 10% from last year. And downloading again would be the fourth revenue stream at $1.2 billion. It's about 5.8% of the industry, and it went down 15.7%. So again, the industry is changing very quickly globally. So the US is the number one market in the world. So again, the United States is the number one market in the world in terms of revenue. Revenue was at 12.2%, $12.2 billion, so $12.2 billion, and that increased by 9.2%. And so just like the global picture, the picture in the United States is very similar. The top revenue stream here in the United States is also streaming. It's at $10.1 billion in the United States, and that makes up 83% of all the revenue made in the United States was through streaming. And so just to kind of give you an idea of how much this is growing, so music subscription, like think about Spotify or something like that, has increased 25% from last year. So from 2019 to 2020, it grew 25%. And so the other revenue streams, the other two major ones, would be physical, so meaning CDs as well as vinyls. And the third revenue stream would be digital downloads, which is at $674 million, or at 6%. And that's decreased by 18%. Something interesting that is happening in the United States that I should have mentioned as a question is vinyl. Vinyl keeps increasing in the United States. People are sort of still buying a great deal of vinyl. They're not necessarily buying so much CDs anymore, but they are buying vinyl. So just to kind of give you an idea, vinyl has now surpassed CDs, and it went up 28% from last year. So vinyl sales were at $626 million. and it increased 28%. So again, CD sales are dropping quickly. We have digital downloads that are also dropping quickly. We have a huge increase in streaming revenue, and we also have an increase of people buying vinyl records. So just to kind of give you an idea of how it works in terms of revenue split for a $17.98 CD or vinyl record. So the music label gets the most revenue. They get about $9.74 of a $17.98 CD or vinyl sale. So $9.74 of the sale would go to the label. So again, $9.74. The retailer would make about $5.40 of the revenue. The artist makes about $1.93, and that's if the artist is lucky, because the artist also has to pay for all the label expenses, right? All the production costs, marketing costs, distribution costs. The artist also splits this revenue amongst its band members. It also has to pay its manager or managers. It also has to pay its attorney or attorneys. It also has to pay for the packaging fee. It also has to pay for the free goods, etc. So free goods essentially are, when I used to work in the radio industry, right, the label would give us free CDs, and CDs, it was considered a free goods because they would give it away for free to us, so we can sample the music and see whether or not we liked it. So that would be an example of a free goods. They also, I believe, give free goods to retailers as well. But anyways, that money, that expense, they charge back to the artist. Packaging fees, again, if you think about the glass casing, if you think about the plastic, that all, they charge the artist for that. So anyways, the publisher and songwriter make about 91 cents from a $17.98 sale of an album, or about 9.1 cents per song. Again, this mechanical license royalty is split between the publisher and the songwriter. And again, as I mentioned before, the artist doesn't get paid until all the production, all the marketing and distribution costs, and all the advances have been recouped. So this is a pretty interesting clip on how the music industry works. It provides a pretty good overview of why, if you are an artist, you should be very careful, and you should really be careful about reading contracts, because historically speaking, the labels have been, I would say, guilty of shortchanging the artists. And this doesn't only apply to the music industry, it applies to television, it applies to movies as well. So by no means it's just a problem within the music industry, but the music industry is notorious for this, that's for sure.
Label that doesn't screw an artist. You talk to anybody who audits their label, they're always owed money. And if nothing else, usually the label holds back enough money that your cost of auditing is such that you won't do it. So that's the business model, is screwing the artists.
Their financial practices have been shady since the beginning of time. It's been grandfathered in since the 50s and 60s when rock and roll really started.
In the 50s, they were screwing the artists then, but there was much, much less money involved. Then as you start to go into the 60s and 70s, the hit ratio is so bad that they're saying, hey, you know, we can't pay the hit artist because he's paying for all the bad artists.
It goes back to how the music industry was set up in the very early stages of the recording industry, taking advantage of uneducated, easily swayed artists who don't really care about the money.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of fallout with still with bands getting paid. You know, we had to sue our label to get paid.
They've created this strange, convoluted system that you have to be a lawyer to really understand, or a mathematician.
A typical record deal is structured something like this. The record label gives in advance, say $250,000 to the artist to record an album. The artist then records the album. Suppose that the album sells 500,000 copies at $10 each, yielding $5 million. The record label then takes their cut out of the $5 million, typically 85% of the total sales, leaving the artist with $750,000. But before the artist receives any payments, the label first deducts the advance. In addition, the record label recoups other costs such as recording costs, half the promotion costs, half the video costs, and tour support. This leaves the artist $425,000 in debt to the record label. And then this debt gets carried on to the next album, and the next album.
I don't know if most people have seen long-form contracts. They're insane, and there's all these little things thrown in. It's kind of like legislature for a government. They put up this big issue, but underneath that issue, there's like 17 other little laws that they threw in that they're not talking about. So when you say yes to this one thing, you're actually saying yes to like 45 other things.
There's a worse one. They used to have damage fees with digital downloads. Digital downloads, like at first they were doing that, like they just trying to get away with murder, just like, let's leave it in there, let's see if the lawyer sees it kind of thing.
Some other hidden items that the contract includes are packaging costs. They deduct up to 25% of the artist's cut, known as a royalty, to cover the expense of plastic cases and artwork. This cost is even administered to digital downloads where packaging is non-existent. 10% is deducted to cover breakage costs during shipping. This started in the vinyl era, continued when CDs replaced vinyl, and still applies today with digital downloads. The 10% free goods deduction is an antiquated system where retailers purchase 100 albums but are given an additional 10 albums at no charge. Since the artist is only paid on albums sold, they are not compensated for those free albums. This deduction still continues even in a digitally dominated market.
Artists generate so much money for so many people that have nothing to do with the creative process at all.
So this is quite true, right? That the industry does take advantage of artists. Again, as I said before, doesn't only apply to music, but also TV, film, etc. And so this is why it's very important, if you are an artist, to surround yourself around good people who are going to try to protect you as much as they possibly can, a good manager, good attorney, those sorts of things. And also, it's also very important for the artist to also understand that it's a business and also learn about the business side of the industry, learn how to read contracts, or at least have a general knowledge of the contracts themselves, learn a different vocabulary that's within the contracts. That way, you can ask, you can have knowledge of them, but you can also ask your attorney, what do these things mean? So trying to get as much knowledge about the business side is also, I think it's very important for artists as well, and not just leave it to and leave it to your manager, leave it to your attorney, and just trust them. Not to say that they won't take care of you, but it's also very good to do your own due diligence as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about streaming. So streaming's, obviously a huge revenue stream right now for artists, global artists, as well as US artists. And this kind of gives you an idea of how much various streaming companies will pay you per stream. And as you can see here, right, they pay next to nothing. And so in order for a company, or an artist, I should say, to really make a significant amount of money, they really have to have, an excess of 1 million streams in order for an artist to be making a significant amount of money. Because I think if you were to multiply, let's say, 100,000 by 100,000 streams, according to Spotify, would probably pay you, I think, if I'm doing the math correctly, which may not be, maybe $31, I believe. That's what it says based on the math, but I'm I'm not 100% sure, but if you just multiply these by 1,000 or by 10,000 or by 100,000 or even by 1,000,000, you would see how little revenue you're actually receiving through these streams. And I do believe that only a handful of the artists, the super popular artists, are the ones that are making the vast majority of the money through streaming. So anyways, there are 3 types of fees that are paid by the streaming companies. And the first fee that's paid by the streaming company is the mechanical license fee. So the streaming services pays the publisher, right? And essentially why? Because the stream is digital, and so it is sort of tangible in that way. And so this is why the streaming service needs permission, right? And that's how they pay the publisher to be streaming this music. And again, the mechanical license fee would go to the publisher, whoever the publisher happens to be. Number 2, the second revenue type of fee is the blanket license fee that we've already sort of discussed in class before. And so the blanket license fee is the streaming service pays to. It's really not really clear if there's paying ASCAP, BMI, or the sound exchange. In theory, based on the definitions that we discussed and definitions that were, that I've been taught, they're supposed to be paying. It sounds like sound exchange, but it really is not really clear if ASCAP and BMI are also being paid by these streaming services. But anyways, regardless, there was a blanket license fee that is being paid by the streaming service. The third and the largest fee, or the most expensive fee, is the fee to the recording owners. So the owners of the recording. So again, the fee that goes to the owners of the recording is the largest of the fees. So again, the 3 fees are the mechanical license fee, the second fee is the blanket license fee, and the third fee is the fee to the owner of the recording. So whoever owns the recording is getting paid as well by the streaming service. So think about the third as being whoever owns the master copy of that particular song. So let's talk a little bit about non-refundable tokens. And so this has become a big deal within the industry. I think this video does a pretty good job of explaining exactly what is an NFT. And again, it's a big trend within the industry, this idea of non-refundable tokens. And depending on the popularity of the band or the artist, they can really make a lot of money off of these NFTs.
Collectors have long been willing to shell out huge sums of money on unique items such as paintings, baseball cards, and vintage cars. But now, collectible items have moved into the digital space in the form of NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. So what exactly are NFTs, and why are they suddenly being sold for millions? NFTs, known as Nifties by insiders, are a type of digital asset. Ownership of these tokens is recorded on a blockchain, a digital ledger using similar technology to the networks that underpin Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But unlike currencies, where every token is of equal value and could be swapped for any other, NFTs have unique qualities which stop them from being interchangeable or fungible. You can think of them like the crypto alternative to rare Pokemon or baseball cards. And just like the traditional art market, NFTs are often sold at auction, with prospective buyers bidding against each other until a price is reached. The rise of the internet meant that images, videos and songs could be reproduced and distributed infinitely online, often without any royalties being paid to their creators. And even tech giants such as YouTube and Spotify have faced criticism for not compensating artists sufficiently for their work. Proponents of NFTs say they address this problem by allowing ownership to be recorded on the blockchain, preventing unlimited reproduction or piracy, and enabling creators to reap the financial rewards. Rock band Kings of Leon sold NFTs over 2 weeks in March 2021, which gave buyers access to a deluxe form of their album for $50, whilst also auctioning off an even more exclusive version limited to just 18 copies. In the same month, the NFT of Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey's first tweet sold for nearly $3 million to Sina Estavi, a Malaysia-based crypto entrepreneur. Meanwhile, art dealers are also getting in on the action, with auction house Christie's running an auction for a virtual work from the artist Beeple, which eventually sold for nearly $70 million. But NFTs aren't a totally new phenomenon. CryptoKitties, a virtual pet game based on the blockchain Ethereum, was so popular in 2017 that they clogged up the network of the cryptocurrency Ether. To date, these colourful online cats have generated sales of over $40 million. So, why are we hearing so much about NFTs now? The coronavirus pandemic played a big role in the NFT boom. In 2020, the total value of NFT transactions quadrupled to $250 million, and the market looks set to grow further in 2021. That's in no small part because of stay-at-home restrictions that resulted in most people spending a lot more time on the internet, and many having spare cash on hand as in-person spending opportunities were limited. It's a trend with parallels in the rise of retail traders betting on GameStop and other historically unloved stocks promoted on the Reddit board Wall Street Bets. The craze also arrives at a time when Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have surged in value, with Bitcoin briefly reaching a record high price of over $60,000 in March 2021. Many NFTs are priced in Ether, the digital token of the Ethereum blockchain. That currency hovered around $2,000 in February 2021, before losing nearly a third of its value in a matter of days, reminding investors of cryptocurrency's wild volatility. Many investors are buying NFTs as a speculative investment, hoping to flip them at a much higher price than they originally paid. But a growing number of people are also holding NFTs long-term as collectibles. Major brands including the NBA and Formula One have launched projects centered around NFTs which can be collected or traded. And people are also finding other uses for NFTs such as virtual real estate and video games. Nevertheless, the NFT space has been met with skepticism from some creators and investors. Critics view it as another crypto fad that will eventually drift into irrelevance, while there are also concerns about the carbon emissions needed to generate these tokens. But expect to hear more about NFTs so long as collectors are willing to buy them. Thank you so much for watching. Would you buy an NFT?
So these non-fungible tokens, right? Essentially think of them as sort of collectors, right? Collectors items, digital collectors items. So just like, I don't know how many of you collected baseball cards when you were kids or something like that. Same sort of idea, right? They're hoping that these digital items will gain value over time because they're essentially supposed to be unique, right? These non-fungible tokens. And so the hope is for collectors is that over time, as the internet continues to grow and maybe even, we end up having some sort of cryptocurrency, I suppose, that these items will increase in value. And so it's interesting. I don't know what's going to happen in the future when it comes to the value of these items, but I do think that this is an interesting sort of change in the industry. All right, let's talk a little bit about live events. So live events like responsibility. So they're responsible for managing venues, right? Booking talent, promoting marketing events, organizing the logistics for an event. So obviously the live events industry have to manage their venues, making sure that they're in good working order, making sure that they're clean. They're also in charge of booking the talent that's going to perform in the particular venues. They are responsible for promoting and marketing events, but also promoting and marketing the venue as well, and organizing the logistics for the event, like organizing the security, organizing the transportation for the talent that's going to be performing at the event, those sorts of things. So that's what the live event industry or people who work in live events are responsible for. And obviously there's a lot more than that. I'm just being very superficial about their responsibilities. So anyways, who is the most important person, at least in the beginning of the tour? And that would be the booking agent. The booking agent is the most important person in the beginning of the tour because the booking agent essentially sets up the tour for the band, right, or the performer. And so they have to they're making all sorts of phone calls to all sorts of different people throughout the country, and they're essentially creating a tour. And so the booking agent is going to have long conversations with the manager, as well as the business manager in terms of dates and those sorts of things. So anyways, what's the biggest challenge when it comes to organizing an actual tour? The biggest challenge would be the ticket prices. What is the appropriate ticket price is the biggest challenge. And again, the most important person, at least in the beginning part of a tour, would be the booking agent, because he sets up the tour for the talent after consulting with the manager and the business manager. So if you're not familiar with what a booking agent does, this is, I think, a pretty good video explaining what exactly a booking agent does.
My name is Peter Loomis. I'm an agent at New Frontier Touring in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been with New Frontier for 8 years. We're a boutique booking agency that handles a roster of about 90 to 100 artists. There's 8 agents and about 8 support staff, contract department, assistants, business manager. The company represents all different genres, from Americana to indie rock to classic rock, from arena acts like the Avett Brothers to artists that are selling 1,000 to 2,000 tickets like Highly Suspect, to more developmental artists like the Western Den, Ages and Ages, the Cave Singers, and the list goes on and on. Agents handle the day-to-day negotiations and operations of touring and any live appearance that an artist makes, essentially for money. We handle talking to festival buyers and club buyers, planning out the routing of a tour and negotiating the deal, the ticket prices, what venue is appropriate in any given market. Some of the things that agents do not do is they do not promote the shows. They will negotiate a advertising budget with the talent buyer of the event, but they're not the ones on the street handing out flyers or deciding what social media to boost, and they're not, handling geo-targeted posts. They're more on the operations before an event gets announced and live. The tools that are helpful for working with an artist, it all depends on the artist and where they are in their career. But having any sort of tour history is the most useful tool to know where they've played, where they haven't played, how many people were there to see them, how much merch they sold, radio history they might have in that market. Anything that is market specific is probably the most important tool for an agent to have. Once a show is confirmed, the assets that are very important are anything the promoter can use to help advertise the show. So images, bios, videos, any links to social media or their music. Those are all assets that we always have in hand that we relay to the venue or event so that they can properly market the show. When I'm starting to think about booking a tour and getting the beginning steps in place, I'll look at their needs and talk to them and see what their expectations are of how long they want to tour for, what's appropriate and how it would be successful for both the artist, the venues that are involved, and obviously the agency side as well. So typically, it will be a combination of markets that they have strengths in, and then obviously when we're routing between those stronger markets, we might play a secondary or tertiary market that we're building in, and we might lean certain direction for different markets if there's any tools that we might have or reasons to go to those markets, whether it's a radio station that's been playing their new single, or a strong fan base from Spotify streaming that we can see. Any sort of analytics that we can use to justify playing certain cities is always helpful tools. A slot on a festival is one of the most sought after gigs for any artist or band. They're getting thousands and thousands of submissions. So it's a lot for them to sift through and to, know who's worth putting on that, noon slot for 30 minutes on the 6th stage and who not to put on it. So when pitching an artist to a festival, any sort of recent press I can give them or history in that market is all useful. I always say the more information that I can tell them, the better. It's always good to be optimistic and show them the trends that we've set up for the lead time, because a big issue with the festivals is they're getting booked 8 to 12 months out. And so it's hard to know the worth of that artist in 8 to 12 months. So you kind of have to line things up with, all the plans being in place and them going well. So a lot of it.
So a really good overview of what exactly a booking agent does. There's huge responsibilities in organizing an actual tour, as you can actually imagine. And so the booking agent has to be very good at managing people and basically working with various venues or I should say talent buyers, and working with managers and business managers, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the golden circle? The golden circle is less than 10% of the actual venue. It's usually the most important seats to sell because they're the most expensive. So again, less than 10% of the venue, the most important tickets to sell. Generally, think about the golden circle. Those are the most expensive, best seats in the actual venue. So hall fee, house rate is the percentage of merch sales that the hall or house is going to charge you. So when a band is selling merchandising inside of the venue is going to charge them a fee. So they're going to get a percentage of the merch. And so what exactly is going to be that percentage? Well, it really depends, but generally speaking, the venue is going to notify the manager or the appropriate people from the band and let them know what exactly is their hall fee or house rate, which again it means a percentage of the merch sale that they're going to keep. So we also have a house fee and a facility charge, and this is a surcharge on each ticket. And so whenever you buy a ticket, if you look at the line items, there's usually a surcharge that the venue charges the buyer of the ticket. And so it is used to maintain the venue, like for instance, it's supposed to help the venue owner use this money to keep the venue clean, maintain its electricity and those sorts of things, maintain the seats, whatever needs to be maintained within the venue. Unfortunately, the artist does not get a cut or a portion of this particular revenue. All this revenue from the house fees or the facility charge goes to the venue owner. All right, and so obviously over time, the live performances have become more important. The industry has become more reliant on the live performance as sales within the industry, meaning physical sales have gone down, digital downloads have gone down, and so because of that, the live performance has become more important within the industry. So labels, in order to try to get or stimulate or try to create a synergy for more sales, is labels will try to encourage artists to go out and tour and also perform at some of the big music festivals, whether it's a Stagecoach or Coachella, whatever. The labels do try to encourage artists to go out there and really try to perform their music live at these festivals, or at least go on a tour. So the summer music festivals are oftentimes a good time to go touring, obviously because the weather is good, and then also you can perform outdoors. That being said, the summer music festivals are trending towards saturation. In other words, there seems to be, or it's approaching the point where there's too many festivals going on at the same time, and so it's hard for a music festival or even an act to stand out. So actually the best time to tour is the winter time. The reason being is because there's less festivals, and so it's easier to stand out within the industry if you put on your festival during the winter and not the summer. So again, summer music festivals are trending towards saturation. And historically, that's always been considered one of the better times to go tour, but again, it's trending towards saturation, which means there's too many of these festivals in the marketplace during these summer months. So, which in a sense, this means that the best time to tour has become the winter because there's less festivals during that particular time. So smaller venues between 1,000 and 6,000 seats are becoming more popular amongst artists, even artists that are quite popular can probably sell out big stadiums or big amphitheaters. They like to perform in these smaller venues. The reason being is because these smaller venues are a lot more intimate. And so this is becoming a trend within the industry. Okay, so large promoters are forcing artists to perform at their venue if they want to perform at another competitor's festival. And so really what large promoters are doing is that they don't want to be overshadowed by another competitor's festival. And so they're essentially forcing these artists to also perform at one of their venues if they want to perform at another competitor's festival. Another thing that large promoters are doing besides forcing artists to perform at their venue if they want to perform at another competitor's festival is that they're asking now for radius clauses and exclusivity. So what do I mean by radius clauses? So let's just say that an artist decides to perform over at Coachella. And so the promoters of Coachella, which I think is AEG, they essentially are going to say, well, okay, we're going to ask for a radius clause of 100 miles, which means that the artist cannot perform within a 100-mile radius of Coachella, which I think is located in India, right? So that's a 100-mile radius in every direction. So some of these large promoters are sort of demanding the artists to abide by these radius clauses. And also they're asking them for exclusivity. So in other words, they may ask an artist, well, if you're going to perform at Stagecoach or at Coachella, you cannot perform 60 days prior, 60 days prior to the festival and 60 days after the festival. So in other words, they want a period of exclusivity where essentially that act is only going to perform once in that market for, over a period of 120 days, which is pretty significant. Now, again, these exclusivities and radius clauses can be negotiated by the artist. And so the bigger the artist, the more power the artist has. And so the artist can essentially say no to the performing at a venue if they want to perform at another competitor's festival. They can also say no to the radius clauses, and they can also say no to the exclusivity. But this is something that large promoters are sort of asking the artist to do. They're asking for these three things again. They're asking for number one, they're forcing artists to perform at their venue if they want to perform at another competitor's festival. They're asking for radius clauses as well as asking for exclusivity. So the International Entertainment Buyers Association, or AIBA, is the trade organization within the live events industry. Okay, let's talk about writers. And so tour writers generally have key contacts. For instance, you're going to have information regarding the booking agency, who is the manager or the contact for the manager, the contact for the management firm, who was tour manager, who was production manager, so who was the publicist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to have a list of key contacts, and the more popular the band is, the bigger the writer is going to be. And so oftentimes bands have multiple writers, and it goes to different people depending on what their specific task is within the actual concert tour. So first and foremost, we have a production and technical writer. And so this is basically going to tell the folks who handle equipment, right? So what type of equipment the band or the act is going to need. So are they going to need something like, a gigantic piano, for instance, or what type of sound system they need, or how do they need the lighting set up for the stage? Those sorts of things are going to be answered within the production and technical writer. So second writer is called a backline writer. So a backline writer. And so this centers around the bigger equipment that's going to be utilized for the actual concert. So meaning things like drums or amps, those sorts of things that are often quite large. And so this is oftentimes used for one-off shows. One-off shows meaning that the band is not on a tour. The band is going to perform one show and one show only. And so they're not going to take their big equipment, cumbersome equipment with them. They're going to take the smaller equipment with them, but not the bigger equipment. And so they're going to expect the venue to provide this larger equipment. And so this is called a backline writer. And again, this is for the venue, so the venue knows what kinds of equipment that's going to be necessary, that the act's going to need for this one show. Merchandising writer, the merch writer. So the merchandise writer is the merch rate, right? And the merch rate essentially is going to tell the venue, okay, well, this is how much we give in terms of merch. And so there might be some negotiation involved, because maybe the house has a different rate when it comes to merch, but the merch generally, I think they're supposed to be pretty close to one another. But anyways, this is what the band agrees to in terms of a merch rate, meaning the amount of money that they're going to give to the venue. And so it requires what's called most favored nation. Most favored nation means that it has the same rate across the board, whether you're a big venue, small venue, whatever. It's supposed to be across the board the same. Also within the merch writer or the merchandising writer usually lays out and tells the talent buyer, the venue, or the concert promoter, whoever, how much space they're going to need, right, within the actual venue in terms of spaces where they're going to be selling the merch. And this is going to be negotiated or dealt with between the venue and the actual act. Number 4, we have the security writer. And so the security writer obviously is the needs and the conditions requested to protect the act. So depending on who the act is and depending on the size of the venue, they're going to require a certain number of security folks to be, trying to protect the actual band. I don't want people, racing up to the stage and, perhaps assaulting the band members or whatever, just where they essentially prevent the show from occurring. And so even if it's just a small delay where somebody runs up and gets a kiss, those sorts of things, that I think in most cases the band probably wants to avoid those sorts of interruptions to occur. And they also want to keep everybody safe in the crowd. So they're going to have a security writer in place. And again, this goes to the people who are in charge of security at the actual venue, making sure that you have enough security folks that's going to keep not only the band safe, but also everybody that attends the show safe. And last but not least is the hospitality writer. And so this is obviously dealing with the comfort for the artists. Generally within the hospitality writer, you have things like, it's going to tell you the kind of hotel that the band's going to require. So maybe they're going to require suites for each individual band member. It's probably going to tell you things like it has to be in a 4-star hotel, or at the very least a 3-star hotel. So it's going to tell you in there exactly what kind of hotel is suitable for this particular band. What is the largest live event company? The largest live event company is Live Nation. So Live Nation, again, is the largest live event company by far. AEG would be a distant second, and Caesars is even a more distant third. So again, Live Nation is by far the largest live event company. AEG is a distant second, and Caesars is a distant third. The biggest revenue stream for these live event companies is admissions to live performing art events. So admissions to live performing arts events would be by far the largest revenue stream. What is the largest event ever? And so this is kind of a tricky question, because you see here this event that I'm about to show you. This is an event that took place, I believe it was in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And they're not quite sure how many people actually attended this particular concert. And this was going to be a free concert by Rod Stewart. Estimates are that about 3.5 million people showed up to the performance of Rod Stewart. Now, the question is, of course, is, number one, that there's really no way of counting the number of folks that actually showed up to this particular concert. You also don't know how many people actually just came to listen to the Pope speak, because the Pope was also speaking that day. I think it was a New Year's Mass or something like that. And also, they were having some sort of, I believe, fireworks show also on the beach. So it's unclear about whether or not all these folks came to watch Rod Stewart perform for free in Sao Paulo, Brazil. But many people point to this being the largest live event, at least within the live music industry. So, but again, there's really no clear number in terms of like how many people actually did show up. Estimates are at 3.5 million, but again, there's really no way of counting that many people. But I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's interesting. Anyways, what's the market structure? The market structure is a monopolistic competition. So the biggest 3 companies, which would be Live Nation, AEG, and Caesars, together don't possess more than 24% of the market. So it doesn't come close to the 40% threshold for the biggest 4 companies would equal to oligopoly, but that's not the case. So again, the market structure for live music is a monopolistic competition because it's not close to 40%. It's about 24% for the largest 4 markets, which is, again, not close to 40%. So concert tours. So first and foremost, the first question mark is blanket license. And the blanket license protects the venue from copyright infringement. It's supposed to also protect the band, the singers, the disc jockeys, the people who are hired to perform in that particular venue. And again, this money is collected by ASCAP, BMI, and by SESAC. And again, this is a blanket license, and blanket license again are paid by the big venues or just and really any venue that plays music. And the second type of license or question mark would be the performance rights license. And this protects the band, the disc jockey, and the singer if they're going to use a musical composition in a venue with no license, or let's say a public space that's non-traditional. You need to secure, in this case, the special events person is supposed to get the performance rights license. So for instance, when I used to work in special events, we had a concert on the street. And so obviously that would be an example of non-traditional. And so we had to get a performance rights license to protect these bands, because obviously the streets that don't have a license. And so it was our responsibility as the special events folks to secure that license so nobody would get sued. So in terms of types of deals, there's a flat guarantee of money, which is the safest, meaning that, let's just say Taylor Swift wants to perform at the Staples Center. And so the Staples Center is going to tell Taylor Swift, okay, we'll pay you, I don't know, $500,000 to come and perform at the Staples Center. And here's your flat guarantee of money. It's $500,000 guaranteed, whether or not it sells out, right? If nobody shows up, it's $500,000. If it's sold out, $500,000. The second type of deal would be the back end deal. So this is settled afterwards. And so the back end deal is usually negotiated by the management people from the act and the venue. And so it's riskier because you as the manager have to kind of get a sense of, or know how much money the concert generated in terms of revenue. And then you have to negotiate, after all the sales are done, negotiate your cut for your act. And so it's a little bit risky because what if nobody showed up, or if it underperformed for whatever reason? Number 3 is a per ticket deal. So in this case, the act would get a percentage or a royalty for each ticket sold. And again, it's risky because, going back to my second point about maybe nobody shows up or underperforms. So if you have a per ticket deal where essentially you're getting a royalty per ticket sold, and it underperforms, then your act is not going to make the amount of money they were expecting. Now, the best deal is called a versus deal. That's the very best deal. And usually what I mean by versus is that it's going to, you're going to compare the flat guarantee of money, right, with, let's say, a per ticket deal, or and whatever amount is greater, that's what you're going to end up with. So again, you're going to compare, let's say, the flat guarantee of money versus, let's say, the per ticket deal, and whatever type of deal generates the most revenue, that's what you end up going with. So for example, right, let's just say the venue capacity is 20,000 seats. And let's just say that you had a flat guarantee of you're going to get paid $200,000. And then according to the per ticket deal, you're getting 25% of each ticket sold, right? 25% of each ticket sold. And the capacity of the venue, again, is 20,000, and you were selling the tickets at an average of $20. So if you multiplied $20 times 20,000, you would equal $400,000. And so a 25% royalty of $400,000 would equal $100,000. So in a versus deal, the flat guarantee generates more income than the per ticket deal. So you would go with the flat guarantee. And again, so only the best and the most powerful acts get to negotiate these sorts of deals. Generally speaking, a lot of the acts get stuck, especially in the beginning, with either a flat guarantee of money, which is safe, but usually that means you're not going to get as much as you might be able to get it on a per ticket deal. And also, in many cases, at least in the beginning, is that you're going to have a back end deal. In other words, your manager is going to settle with the venue afterwards. And if you are lucky enough to negotiate a per ticket deal, usually your royalty is going to be pretty low. And so therefore, in the beginning at least, right, you're going to probably settle for the first 3. And once you become established and become popular, then you can negotiate a versus deal, which is the best deal. With generally only the top acts can negotiate those sorts of deals. And just sort of to review again, the blanket license again protects the venue from copyright infringement, and the performance rights license protects the band and the DJ and the singer if they're going to use musical composition in a venue with no license or public space. So, and again, in this case, right, let's say you hire a cover band, or a disc jockey is using somebody else's music, and the venue has no license. So in that case, if the venue has no license or it's in a public space, then the special events person is supposed to try to secure that license. And that would be called a performance rights license. Sometimes you can also refer to as a per program license as well. And so that concludes my lecture for music.